Indian Americans are waiting enthusiastically for Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to the US. This will be his first state visit to the US at the invitation of Joe Biden and First Lady Jill Biden. Reports said that Indians are eagerly waiting for the Prime Minister's visit and they are going to gather in Washington to welcome him. So, in the light of his upcoming visit, today we have a member of the Global Kashmiri Pandit Diaspora in the US and also a human rights activist, Dr. Mohan Sapru. Hello, sir. Welcome to our show.
Thank you so much for this invitation. I'm very happy to be here with you.
To begin with, how do you think that Indians are going to feel or they are feeling regarding the Prime Minister Narendra Modi's upcoming visit to the US?
Indian American diaspora is very excited and feel really honored that the Prime Minister of India has been invited by the US President for a state visit, which, as we most of us know, is a very formal ceremonial process, a kind of highly ranking diplomatic honor which has been given to India. And such state visits are generally confined to very close allies of US. So I think this whole invitation really gives an indication that US is attaching a very great level of importance to developing a kind of geopolitical strategic partnership with India, and which I think is great honor for India, great honor for Indian American community in general.
So, like you mentioned that there's a strategic alliance between the Indians and the Americans here. So, can you speak a little bit more about how the PM's visit is going to impact the Indo-American strategic alliance?
I think the current kind of conditions and current international atmosphere overall is very crucial, in the sense that we are in the middle of a raging war between Ukraine and Russia. We are in the middle of very aggressive China. We are in the middle of a kind of demolished, or I would say economically broken Pakistan as India's neighbor. And more importantly, we are in the middle of a new world order emerging, and new epicenters of power emerging. So if you really took a look at all of these different factors together, I think what this invitation really means is that US and India are looking forward to a new phase of friendship and cooperation in the field of science and technology, in the field of high-level military cooperation, in the field of developing a kind of geopolitical alliance, particularly to combat Chinese aggression, and more importantly, to find a newer voice for India in this new world order. So in that sense, this trip has really a lot of symbolic as well as meaningful significance attached.
Since you spoke about the Indian diaspora in the US, do you think that the Indian diaspora in the US particularly will be affected, or anything will change for the Indian diaspora in the US after the PM's visit?
I think we are in a state where we have a kind of tale of two cities, I should say. One is that there is one side in which we see that the prestige of India is emerging. If you talk about the intellectual class in US, they have such a high level of appreciation, and they really have awe-inspiring kind of notion about what India has contributed in the field of philosophy and spirituality, and what India is contributing currently in the field of science and technology, and how Indian American community is like a role model for family values, for economic growth, for steering careers. So that's one side. But other side also is that where this nexus between anti-Indian elements are trying to import, I would say, some of the fault lines of Indian society, such as caste system, or such as outcry about false narratives about Hindutva, which is being transported somehow to the US as well. And the result of that is that there's a gradual trend for increased Hinduphobia partly because this narrative is being supported by media. And it's also very unfortunate that some of the opposition leaders in India, when they visit US or other foreign countries, they seem to lend support or credence to this kind of narrative. Obviously, they are doing it for their political gain. They know it's not true, but together it kind of creates the impression as if somehow India has some degree of crisis, which obviously it's not. So why that's really linked to US Prime Minister's visit is that's an opportunity for the US or the world to see a democratically elected popular leader from India talking to the world, talking to the superpower of the world on its own terms, and looking for a cooperation and wanting to do something together new.
As per your opinion, what do you think that the Indians who are living in India and the Indian diaspora in the US, is there a possibility that they feel differently about what you just said? Like, do you think that there's a possibility that maybe living in India is different? Indians' opinions in India are different than the ones who are living outside in the US?
Yeah, I think to a great extent, there's a reflection of it all. Just like in India, you would see a very wide spectrum of opinions or ideas or ideological bent, depending upon which particular subpopulation you're addressing. Similarly, in US, you will see if you talk to a general American, let's say American, white American or black American, I think majority of them are, first of all, not much really involved in international affairs overall. Maybe they may not have much information about it. But those who are involved, now within them is a category. They are highly educated, kind of more in kind of pristine fields. They seem to have such a great appreciation for what India has done, as I was mentioning earlier, in terms of what a pristine way of thinking, that particularly coming from Indian philosophies like Shaivism or the Vedantic philosophies, they are really in awe. They just talk about that they are trying to imagine when the rest of the world was trying to figure out the basics of how to live. Thousands of years back, Upanishads were talking about some of the most subtle concepts about mind and brain and consciousness and conditional consciousness, unconscious consciousness, or the realms of mind, which is something rather too sophisticated for that time. So that's very inspiring for them too. But then there is other general population who are much more influenced by the false narratives which are being spread. And a lot of anti-national elements are involved with that. As I said, media is involved with that. And they seem to be kind of, to a great extent, getting fed on this manufactured diet of this narrative about Hindutva or narrative about democratic systems in India being under danger, and press freedom and all that narratives. So I think they do create certain kind of impression within the public. So what you really see is a kind of mixed bag, and you will get different opinions depending upon which section of either Indian American population you talk to or which section of American population you talk to. So it's always a mixed bag here.
Right. And speaking about mixed bag, India, as you know, is a diverse culture. So as an Indian living in America, do you think that the diversity in our culture is appropriately represented?
I would say, unfortunately, not. I have been living in US from my student days about more than 30 years. And I think what recently has happened in the, I would say, in more recent past, in a decade or so, I think there has been more tendencies in terms of trying to build narratives which are not factual. Obviously, they're done for political reasons in some cases, or ideological reasons for some reasons, so that there's less emphasis being given to the pristine contribution of India in the field of philosophy, spirituality, or science and technology, and more of that stress is being paid to some of the fault lines and trying to, for example, exaggerate the gas situation or trying to import that to the US, that concept of that kind of, and then try to somehow link that to the downtrodden people in America, and also trying to somehow spin the fact that any democracy really means that you have free elections, and free elections will have majority of people vote, and they should have the right to elect their leaders and elect the priorities that they want in their country. And while US is applauding the rest of the world for that, it's an irony that many of the same people somehow try to paint Indian democracy as some kind of majoritarian rule, which is basically contradictory, because the whole institution of democracy is based on allowing people to elect their leaders freely. And it will be done on a majority basis, because you can't have everybody's view. It has to be majority view. So it's really kind of Soros-driven kind of narrative where you try to paint a genuine, thriving democracy and try to paint it in some kind of majoritarian rule, or give it the kind of connotation of somehow the democratic institutions are not really thriving, which is obviously not true. But I think that kind of narrative is there, and I think both the Indian American community here as well as Indian government, I think, have a responsibility to a great extent to be able to tell the truth to the world and the raised voice, which is going to be a very gradual process using different platforms. And I'm sure journalists like you have a role in that as well.
I sure do hope so. So speaking of truths, being a Kashmiri Pandit, which is a section of the society which has been downtrodden and has faced innumerable disasters and pain, what do you think that, is there any discourse in America regarding the Kashmiri exodus? Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Thank you. It's very, very important and pertinent question. I'm glad you raised this. The fact is that when genocide of Kashmiri Pandits and forced exodus of Kashmiri Pandits happened in 1990, we know that the entire world stayed silent. The Indian judiciary stayed silent. The Indian political leadership stayed silent. I would say the Indian masses outside of Kashmir stayed silent, and nobody talked about it. And the world didn't know much about it. And fast forward to a situation where this Kashmiri Pandit community, a microscopic community, while they were dealing with the trauma of losing their home and homeland and their roots, and trying to make some sense of their life, trying to settle their children or educate them and all that, while that took some time, almost decades to do. And you see currently our Kashmiri Pandit community is scattered all over the world. And that's why Global Kashmiri Pandit Diaspora, or GKPD, which I am the coordinator in the Washington, D.C. area for GKPD, we have tried to bring this all Kashmiri Pandit community scattered throughout the world on a common platform to talk about the genocide of Hindus, to talk about the forced exodus of Hindus from Kashmir, and to talk about the most fundamental violation of human rights. I know a lot of people talk about, or they fakely talk about, human rights violation, but when an innocent person is killed by a terrorist, the human right of the terrorist is being talked about quite a bit, kind of in a very perverse way, but not many people talk about the human right of an innocent person who had no fault of his or her own, who got killed, who got raped, just for being a Hindu in Kashmir. And otherwise, Kashmiri Pandits are very much like any other Kashmiri in Kashmir. Only thing different is that they don't belong to a particular Muslim faith there. And that became a kind of central trigger by painting them as kafirs and driving them out of Kashmir. Now, with regard to your question about how the US or Indian diaspora here was aware or is not aware about, the fact is that they were not really aware about it. Not only the Indians in general here, they themselves were not aware much about it. And I must say here that the contributions made by the movie Kashmir Files has been enormous. I know there has been a lot of press there in India which have tried to paint it as some kind of propaganda. But as someone as myself who's a Kashmiri Pandit and who has gone through the genocide, whose family has gone through genocide, I do know that every shot, every dialogue, every scene in the Kashmir movies was nothing but actual depiction of what really happened. It almost felt like, many of us felt like that it was not a movie made by a movie director or producer. It was our own story being told somehow on Celluloid. So in that sense, yes, that movie has created quite a bit of awareness to the masses about what really happened. But it's an ongoing process. We are trying to approach the lawmakers in US, trying to educate them about it. But so a brief answer to your question is that yes, they're partially aware about it, but a full awareness about the tragedy of Kashmiri Pandits, the full awareness about the human rights violations of Kashmiri Pandits, the full recognition of genocide of Kashmiri Pandits is still a work in progress. And I think we all are trying to contribute to that, basically letting the world know the truth about Kashmiri Pandit genocide.
Right. So we have come to an end to this interview. I just want to ask you one last question. It may seem a little silly, but so Indian Americans are quite enthusiastic about the Prime Minister's visit to the US, and many of them are gathering in the Washington DC to welcome Prime Minister Narendra Modi. So are you willing to take part in that welcoming party, or do you anybody that you know are taking part in that welcoming party?
Oh yeah, absolutely. As I mentioned that, Prime Minister's visit, even before he visits, we have a lot of welcome marches and events happening almost in all major cities of US. In Washington, D.C., where I live, I know in our own city we have a march happening between Washington Monument to Lincoln Memorial in honor of Prime Minister Modi, and a unity march happening. We have got cultural programs organized. We have got a White House South Lawn reception event in honor of Prime Minister Modi. Then we have got an IndoAmerican dinner gathering in which Prime Minister Modi is going to address invited IndoAmerican diaspora. So as an organizing member of many of these events, yes, personally, I will be there for all these events. And I do know a lot of our Indian Americans are looking forward to being there. I can share you this one, that White House is really kind of unexpectedly didn't know that they have thousands of requests for participation in the reception at South Lawn, and they're currently trying to figure out how to deal with this heavy rush of these people who registered for the event. So yes, we all look forward for being there, and we will be there for all the events. And I really look forward for being a Washingtonian myself to be part of that.
Right. So thank you so much, Dr. Sapru, for joining us today, and we hope that you get to see Prime Minister Narendra Modi again and maybe interact with him. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you everybody for watching Oneindia News.
Subscribe to One India channel and never miss an update.